Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets, our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com.
This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of TAMA may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, tax prep, and planning all are under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business, or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com.
Parents, when you hear the 2 words college planning, what are the first thoughts that enter your mind? Is it fear? Is it the, oh my gosh, we're not ready for this, both financially or mentally? Today on the show, I have Heidi King. Heidi is an educational consultant that helps parents transition through the college planning years, both from a planning standpoint, an emotional standpoint, and to a certain degree, a financial standpoint. This is going to be a great initial conversation into what it takes to go through the college planning process. A lot of people think it's just about saving and financial, but we're going to learn today that it's much more than that. Please enjoy my conversation with Heidi King. So I think, Heidi, the best place for us to start is with this quiz that you showed a group of advisors, I don't know, probably back in October at the FPA Michigan Symposium. And the question that you posed to all of us was, as a percentage, how much has tuition increased nationally at public institutions since 1990? And so your options were 73%, 106%, 180%, and 213%. And I loved your last one. I may need my TI-35 calculator. And I think the number that I picked was 180% increase. I think if I remember right, the consensus of the group, I think, was either like 73 or 106. It was even lower. And I'll let you tell the audience, what was the answer?
Yeah, for public institutions, the increase is actually 213%. That's the highest of all of those numbers. Pretty shocking. So
the question is that I ask as a father of 4, triplets plus 1, and a lot of parents are our audience that listen to this podcast. And so, full disclosure, you just went through the reason why we're having you on is to talk about, one, your professional experience, and we'll get into College Inside Track and what you do there. But I think just as important, people want to hear from you as a mom of 2 boys that just went through this college planning experience on your own. And so, to kind of tee that up, going back to the question we just asked, why is this increase so large?
Yeah, for sure, far outpacing other industries. I think that's the also part of the equation. It's how come this specifically has gone up so much, and some of it is just because changes back decades and decades ago. Federal funding used to come a little bit more through the states, where the tuition itself didn't get passed on to the families as such. The other reason just for increases would be, the idea that education is something that probably people are willing to pay for. So not all universities need to keep their costs low for the purchase of college.
So you hear often about, when we went to school, there weren't all the what's the word I'm looking for? The niceties, if you will. Like it was a luxury if your dorm had AC. It was a luxury if there was a really nice dining hall. It was a nicety if you had good food on campus. Today, like you go to some of these colleges and it's just amazing. Like the athletic facilities, the classroom settings with tech, and like some of, I know my alma mater, Adrian College, they have a full-blown TV radio production studio now, which didn't exist before, but they now offer those types of communication degrees as majors, which weren't an option when I was there. And I think some parents see those things and like, well, is that really what I'm paying for? Am I paying for my kid to go to basically Club Med for 4 years versus actually getting, what they need out of it, which is experience in an education?
Well, it's a good point, right? I went on all those dorm tours myself, and it definitely seems like infrastructure is a necessity, but luxury is a pull from a marketing standpoint for the colleges. So in order to keep up with the Joneses in the next state, there has to be, to a certain extent, they are choosing and making choices based on the market and what they think will pull more students in, so they won't lose kids to the other universities nearby. So I would say true on that. Meaning, I do see some of our universities having to compete with other universities, maybe SEC, big football, right? They get a lot of money from big football or athletics. And then maybe some of the schools that don't still need to improve their dorms to compete. Now, from an academic standpoint, there is a technology. At some point, you have to be at entry level or above to serve the student in a digital world. So I do think that some of those enhancements and improvements are probably super beneficial. I know as a mom of 2 boys that was looking through business schools, the idea of, certain technology was a factor, frankly. New buildings for the business would garner more attention from my kids, thinking that they were going to have access, to different, just technology. So I guess that's twofold in terms of some of it is to keep up and some of it needs to keep up.
So we've talked about just the pure increase, the triple-digit increase of tuition. But why is it that, what are some other aspects that are making it harder for families to afford college?
Yeah. Several factors in play here. The first factor that comes to mind as far as making college, more difficult for us to afford is the federal direct student loan that students get on their own without a parent co-signing. That amount that a student can get hasn't changed in over 30 years, 40 years. It's still
that's the 5,500 initially that freshmen get, correct?
Exactly. So freshmen get a certain amount, that's 5,500. Sophomores get a little more, 6,500. And then juniors and seniors get $7,500 for each year, where they don't need mom and dad or a grown-up to co-sign. So it's $27,000 they can get. If you think about what $5,500 covers, doesn't cover tuition at more than 90% of schools. So it's harder because parents are having to be way more involved in the purchase of college and just paying for it year to year to year to year over 4 years. Students can't do it on their own. Very, very, very challenging. If you think of 90% of schools, that loan won't even cover tuition, let alone the, housing, should they stay on campus. So the fact is parents are having to pay for college more than they used to 30 years ago. Other factors that are making, college just more challenging. And there's a new test optional landscape as a result of COVID. Because of COVID, testing centers actually closed. Couldn't take the test, couldn't take an ACT, couldn't take an SAT, right? Because you have to be at a testing center. So as a result of those testing centers closing, test optional landscape, which to be fair, had started, but it is a new amount of testing centers that you just couldn't even take it. So colleges made test optional landscape an opportunity for kids that weren't able to take the test to apply based on other merits other than the test. Because of this, so many kids massively applied to colleges in droves. The percentage of kids applying to schools has increased 30, 20% easily at many, and I would say most of the flagship and or tier 1 and tier schools. Think about that. They are getting so many people apply, they don't need to discount anything to you. It's like buying a new...
It's basically supply and demand. I was actually hoping you were going to get to these stats because when you covered this in the presentation that you did for us, those were the numbers that I was blown away with. Obviously, the tuition increase is just huge, but doing what I do and working with enough families, I see that. But I don't think that parents see the ultimate increase in people applying that leads to your point you just made is that why do these institutions need to discount, especially like these, as you call them, flagship schools like Ohio State, Alabama, UCLA, especially like with us. So for full disclosure audience, Heidi is based in the Chicagoland area. As most of you all know, I'm in Metro Detroit. So we're in the northern part of the state. And a lot of these kids these days that I talk to and parents, their kids want to go south. They want to go to Florida, Florida State, Alabama, Auburn, out west. And, those schools know that.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. They do. It is such that, and there's such an influx of applicants to them that some of those flagship state school, Georgia, and most recently Tennessee, have had to implement policies where they're going to take their own students first. They're just going to take the top 10% of all applicants, which is similar to what Texas does. They're going to take the top 10% of their in-state applicants. Assuming they don't fill up the class from there, that is when they get the out-of-state folks. And they just won't need to give out the minimum scholarships even to us as out-of-staters, right? My kids did the same. Find many, many, many state schools. And overnight, we have seen a difference from one child to the next, applying with similar stats. They just gave out fewer and fewer merit scholarships. just because of COVID and the increases. A typical yearly increase for those schools would have been 2%. We are talking upwards of 20% and sometimes 30%.
Wow.
Yeah, 2. And now we're seeing, because of the test optional landscape, they can just apply without a 29 or a 31 or a 34. They know they can apply because they have the GPA.
Mm-hmm.
So they lean back on holistic admissions. And it is definitely overwhelming the admissions officers. They are just having to read through more and more applications as well. So they're, if you can imagine that, they're having to hire more people.
I was going to say there's a cost component to that for the schools.
Yes. And there's a cost component for us as families because applying to schools is not free. Typically it's $75 or $100. So all of a sudden, what would be typical, we recommend when we work with families, 6 to 12 schools, apply to 6 to 12. More than that, it takes a ton of time to make an individual, application matter from school to school. There are small differences that you can make that will make a difference to the college as they read them. If you're applying to 20, that's very challenging to differentiate yourself and differentiate the school. So, and then mom and dad, you're having to pay the difference and potentially just $1,000 more to apply to that many more schools. And trust me, we have to give pep talks to our kids to not do that. They don't need to. They don't need to for successful admissions, and it's costing us too much money.
So one of the things I want to get into is this concept of yours that you call right fit, because I think that was a really interesting point that you made that has a cost component to it. But let's come back to that. But stay on this for one more topic, if you will. Is does this changing landscape, does that create opportunities for other schools to step in and kind of, other than these flagship schools, offer something that most people may not be thinking of? So, for example, like if somebody's set on going to Alabama and they're going to be paying out the nose, if you will, is this an opportunity for that conversation between parents and student, if you will, to say, okay, we know you want to go here, but can you consider these other options, which may be a better fit financially and academically as well?
Yeah, for sure. So the conversation is about right fit, but right financial fit is part of that component. So potentially cast a wider net. If you primarily have a school fit and you think of that in the initial search, then just take a road that is potentially less traveled. Seeking out schools that don't have to turn down 90% of their applicants is the road less traveled. And it is often more strategic, and you won't lose the component of right fit at all. Matter of fact, it might be a better fit, because you're at a college that isn't busting at the seams and having to put kids in the Holiday Inn because their dorms can't fit you. Off-campus housing, huge problem. They don't have enough space at some of these colleges to house the amount of applicants. They are still reeling from that. Now, have they level set? Mostly. They are having to build more dorms at some of the campuses. So absolutely, we definitely recommend our families if, who wants to overpay for school, right? So if you need to and want to leverage and be more strategic, it's considering other schools that might not be the most well-known, but are still fabulous opportunities. I mean, get outside, think more than the top 10 lists, is what we help with. And I would, impassion people. There's so many, 4,000 schools, 4,000
There's a lot
schools.
of choices out there.
There are a lot of great choices out there. doesn't just have to be our state flagship school in order for us to, because really all these other smaller schools and these medium-sized schools, they want to compete for those super smart or those super, collaborative, kids.
So let's actually stay on this topic of right fit. Can you go into a little bit more detail of what this concept means and how it can impact both financially and the emotional decisions that go into this? Because, like buying a new house, there's a financial component and there's an emotional component. And just like buying a new house, paying for college for parents is going to be one of the most biggest investments they're ever going to make.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that, as what you do as a professional and what I do and working with families going through this college planning process, is to really help people manage the emotional side as they try to grapple with the financial side of things.
Yeah. Yeah. So getting deeper into what right fit means for your individual student. That is what I think we would like the light bulb to go on a little bit brighter, right? So many different opportunities, because it is college marks the first step into independence for these kids. It is actually typically the first time a child gets to choose this school based on something other than it's at the end of the street or in our town, right? So it's a wonderful opportunity. So think a little bit bigger, but also think a little bit more individually. What does your child need? So we break it down like equal parts of a triangle, right? It is right academic fit, right social fit, both for the student, and then that last piece of the triangle is right financial fit for the family. All three equal. Now, most of us parents, and I can say this, I totally understand 2 kids in college right now. Most of us think about it more like student driven. Where do you want to go? Where are you going to succeed? Where do you want to live for 4 years? Right? But at the end of the day, if we get those financial award letters and don't want to pay for the school, or literally shouldn't pay for that school, it is extremely hard to say no to your student when they have fallen in love with the school that you can't afford. So that is how we are getting over our skis and potentially purchasing something that if we had been a little bit smarter or knew a little bit more, or the school had been a little bit more transparent, which what they were going to cost us, those are problems, right? That we can't necessarily control and are challenging. So when we work with students, it's about earlier having these conversations with, Paul, and, this idea of what are we about to purchase and how do we think about it? So academically, what kind of a learner is my student? Where are they going to thrive? Are they competitive? Are they collaborative? Do they need to have experiential learning components earlier in the process? And what does college give? Does this college give that or no? And then think about that. Really, what kind of a learner are you? The idea of a competitive school seems wonderful. Sometimes you need to be big fish in a small pond, and that is okay. A little bit of what's my major going to be? And then am I going to have the ability to change my major and frankly, learn, be exposed to other subsections of a career for better growth about who I want to be as an employee, as a worker. That's the best scenario. Now, kids love to talk about the vibe, the social fit, right?
Right.
Where do I want to be? Where am I going to find my people? And frankly, this is important because for the kids that transfer, it's typically because of friendships that they felt like they didn't fit in and they didn't find their friendship. So I don't mean to diminish it. It is going to be the number one factor in something that could be expensive if they have to transfer. So social fit. Will they find their people? Is it the idea of being big, small, or medium? What are those components? Greek life, no Greek life, big sports events, or I would rather play my own sport, not necessarily watch somebody else. All parts of the equation, super important when you're thinking about, and warmer, right? I haven't met a kid yet in our area, because we are northern, that doesn't want to go to the beach and sometimes the mountains, right? That idea of going out to Colorado, so important. And then the last part for us, and this is where you do come in so helpfully, is the idea that it is okay to have boundaries on what you want to purchase and how much you want to spend. And think of it from a 4-year plan. So very important. If you have this amount saved, break it up. We have this amount of saved. Well, hey, we're going to put that into 4 years, not just we're going to pay for the first 2 and then figure it out from there. That is a disaster and usually leaves families short.
Yeah, that's a dangerous situation to get into. There was a lot to unpack there. But one of the things that you mentioned, because I just wrote an article about these 3 right fit topics. Again, it was academic, social, and financial. And reader responded back and asked the question, and I get this often, is, Paul, when do you start talking to your kids? Is it 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade, 10th grade, senior year in college? And my approach has always been, it's never too early to start having conversations. And for me, in my own personal experience, it's starting to have conversations right now with my kids. So my triplets are in 7th grade and my plus one's in 6th grade. And it's not like, it's more of a general conversation. Like, they know they have money in their 529 plans. They know that they get money for their birthdays or for Christmas, and it goes into there. And I'm quite honest about, like, this is how much you have in there right now. And my one daughter, Madison, like, she's already got a list, which on some levels is kind of like disturbing, because I'm like, I don't want her to feel that pressure. And I think one topic I want to come back is these are 18-year-old kids trying to decide what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. And I think that's a lot of pressure to put on kids, is try to figure out what their major should be. Some kids, they just naturally know. I think for most of us, speaking for somebody that changed majors, I think 4 times, but was still able to graduate in 4 years, it was a miracle in and of itself. But having, I think that pressure can be a little scary. And so, but like Madison, for example, Notre Dame, because we're huge Notre Dame fans, is on our list. And, I'd be totally blunt. Like, do you realize how much Notre Dame costs? And this is how it kind of works. You're either super smart and they give you a full ride, or you have to pay the entire bill. It's like one or the other. There's no in between, hardly.
Well, that is true. So this is the flexibility in pricing for schools, right? Some schools do not need to be flexibly priced.
Right.
Notre Dame is one of them. Again, it's like buying a new iPhone. Apple doesn't need to discount that yet. Okay? So you're just going to have to pay full price to a school that's highly selective. So those schools that have 25% and below acceptance rates. So like Notre Dame would be somewhere probably between 10 and 15%. They don't need to give you merit money for a carrot to come. They don't.
Right.
But they will do a good job is covering a percentage of financial need based on salaries and income and assets. So that's another thing. You look for schools depending on what your goals are. It's sometimes having a variety of schools on there can be beneficial. But at the end of the day, we always want to make sure it is okay to have that. Let's find out a school that might be similar to Notre Dame, that feels like Notre Dame, that gives you that vibe of Notre Dame, but at the end of the day, wouldn't be north of $75,000.
I was gonna say $80,000. It's still hard to say those numbers out of my mouth, Heidi.
Yeah, it probably is over $80,000 because they don't really do they cover need, but they don't necessarily cover merit for the applicants. And for what you're saying, 70% of the kids switch majors by the time they're freshmen and sophomore. Now, 4 is excellent that you were able to be able to do that in 4 years.
And the reason why is they had some similar, there was some overlap between the 4 different majors I was in. And then I actually went to summer school for 2 summers, which was how I ended up getting out.
Yeah.
Time.
That's super. It's the intentionality and the giving yourself the opportunity at the end of the day. Being able to stay in and study more typically enriches you. I know it doesn't necessarily feel that way necessarily at 20.
Right.
But looking back, it's a gift to be able to stay in and study a little bit more in hopes that may broaden who you are.
So I want to come back to one of the financial impacts that I think that you mentioned about Right Fit, especially now that we're talking about transferring. But let me come back to the question I posed, which was how early do you recommend talking with kids about this?
Yeah, this is a good question. So I would say you don't need to wear the hat of thinking about college every week when you are 12, 7th grade. But I think it is the awareness of, do they want to be on track?
I have to laugh because having this podcast for almost over 3 years now, we talk a lot about transition and transitions, and it always comes back to this keyword awareness.
Yeah.
So it's always the buzzword. You hit it already, Heidi. Awareness.
Yeah. So, do you want, let's keep on track for things and give us options. I think that was what my messaging was for my kids. Like, it was okay if college at the end of the day wasn't for you. It does not need to be a traditional path for everybody. But it is nice to keep your options open so you do have options at the end of the day. I think there are lighter conversations and intentionality. Those earlier years in middle school, the real college conversations from a student standpoint can kick in freshman year, sophomore year, and junior year, because most colleges don't accept grades past junior year. Now, some California schools don't even consider freshman year grades because they know there's such a transition between 8th grade and freshman year.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which can be a huge benefit, because I can't tell you how many parents I meet say, freshman year was a doozy. We weren't ready. And so this had this bubble, whatever. So I guess understanding a little bit of the opportunities, but leaving the doors open. Freshman year, there's an opportunity to kind of be a freshman and consider college. And then that just increases with every year, knowing that junior year is a big year in college process, in study for your own high school time frame, but also in starting to hone in. And this is something that I guess was unfamiliar to me as a mom. I didn't realize the parallel importance between the tasks your junior year in college, while also being in the most academic, stringent, and challenging year of high school. There's a lot to do as juniors. So breaking those tasks out are so important so they don't have too many stressors at the same time.
So coming back to Right Fit, I think in specifically talking about the interesting financial component to this. So meaning we're looking at making this huge investment, trying to get the right fit school, and it doesn't end up being the right fit. And you threw out some numbers about what the financial impact of getting this wrong is. So we kind of led off, with, college tuition is exploding. You also noted that, the federal loans haven't kept up with the inflation of college.
Yeah.
But I think another interesting piece to the work that you do and that you were pointing out is, what's the cost of having to transfer?
Yeah.
Can you dive into that a little bit? Because I found this like really interesting. Again, especially from somebody with personal experience of transferring schools.
Yeah. So it is so two things. First of all, you are with all intentionality super excited to head off to college. It is a big, big, big step in independence. And then emotionally, if you get there and it's a bust, it is challenging to go through that emotionally. You're so disappointed that you want to leave school. So you've got an emotional component to being unhappy enough that you want to leave school mid-semester, in the semester. But financially, it increases, one transfer increases the cost of college by $14,000. And 38% of kids, statistics right now, 38% of kids that are heading off to school end up coming home and transferring. So just from an economic standpoint, you're adding $14,000 to your degree. Now, interestingly enough, if you dig deeper into those statistics and those challenges, those kids come home and then they try to go to school again. They level set. We're going to go to community college. We're going to work for a little bit. Now I'm more grown up. I'm a little bit more, maybe I've got my study habits in gear or my priorities a little bit more in order. So you go off to school again. Statistics show that because you are now significantly older than the incoming class, 45% of those kids that go back again transfer.
Transfer a second time.
So the stats are 38% transfer one time. Of those 38%, 45 of them transfer a second time. The cost to that is $24,000 if you have total for the two. So you're adding $24,000 to the cost of your degree by transferring if you have to transfer. And so it is so, so very important to have these deeper conversations about right fit. So you can avoid those transfer statistics. Stop following your friends to college, or just think about it in terms of warmth and or far away. Just have deeper conversations about, what does this college get you? And are you, does that meet your own personal goals? Learn more about who you are in the conversation.
So I should have told you, we probably need to make this like a 2-part series, maybe even a 3-part mini series, because we haven't even got to financial aid, which is something I wanted to get to. And so we may not have time. So hopefully you're willing to come back, because what I really want to get into is, this podcast is about stories. And when I first got to know you and you told me your story, I'm like, this has got to be shared. So can you walk us through how you came into the field of college planning, college financial planning?
So my previous profession and how that all happened.
Yeah. How did that all walk our audience through how that happened? And I think that will kind of lead into an area I want you to expand on as well, about sharing your personal experiences going through college planning with your two boys.
Yeah. So I did have a previous career, more than 20 years, working for UPS as an airline pilot. I had flown airplanes since I was a junior in high school. Was fortunate enough to go and do that in the 80s and 90s as a profession. Got on with UPS, worked my way from 747 flight engineer, and somewhere in that 20-year mark, ended up having a health issue that has me retiring after 20 years, which was a little bit of a surprise to have to retire. But sometimes those things happen for a reason. So I had a great 20-year career as a pilot flying 767s and Airbus A300s for UPS. So I was retired, mostly raising my kids, enjoying that time as a mom because I had spent so much time on the road flying international.
I was going to say you were gone all the time.
I was gone all the time. I would be gone between 12 and probably 16 days a month, depending. So it was clear that staying home was the right thing. So I really looked forward to the opportunity of choosing and heading into the college search with my kids. We started doing that with baseball tournaments when they were freshmen. We were in Ann Arbor. We would go have a burger on campus. A baseball tournament at Vanderbilt. Hey, let's walk around that campus. Visiting grandma in Florida. Let's go see a football game, But here's the deal. They weren't going into professions that I knew about. Matter of fact, I knew less and less and less about their professions. And it was clear that I was not necessarily coming at this with current information. So challenges started to bubble up that I didn't foresee were happening just because I didn't have the expertise in something, because their admissions are very competitive. So we didn't know what grades you needed, what test scores you needed, what was a good essay. And I think that was so incredibly frustrating and just got more and more frustrating between the two kids. And so when I had an opportunity to come back into the workforce,
can I just ask, Heidi, sorry for interrupting, is that just because you did, it's like that old adage, you didn't know what you didn't know, like there was no, you didn't, there was no resources that were screaming like, hey, this is what you should be doing. Like you kind of felt like an island on your own.
Yeah. I mean, I talked to the mom groups and the friends as best we could, right? I attended some lectures at a library or that the school would put on, but it wasn't until the admissions officer at Miami of Ohio, right near us, called our family and said, you know what? Your son is a fabulous applicant, but he is not going to get direct admit into the nursing. And you know what? He didn't put down a second choice on the Common App because frankly, he did it on his own and didn't know that he should. And so here we had spent years visiting schools, and at the end of the day, we were just short. And if it wasn't for the kind person in an admissions office calling personally to myself, we would have no idea how completely lost we were. And so truly, this is why I do this. It's because I do not want other families to be misinformed. And so every podcast, every library that I can speak to just give other people a little bit more awareness about current admissions, what it's costing us as families, and then how to just do a more strategic job on the front end so you are not getting those phone calls 8 weeks after your son applied. And then now you have to figure out what to do and add more schools to the list because he's not going to get a direct admit into the field of his choice.
So just hearing you talk about that, I harken back to my own experience, growing up, in rural Michigan. And, I only had one school as well, and it was Notre Dame, and I didn't get in. And my backup school was IU at Bloomington, and I got in, and then they sent me the bill. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to play for this. Yeah. And then, I was lucky. Some kid I played baseball with since I was like, I don't know, 6, 7 years old. Got into, well, at the time it was called GMI. Now it's called Kettering. And he's like, well, if you want to go into engineering, this would be the place to go. I'm like, it's pretty hard to get in, and, you can see, and I ended up getting in, and, I ended up going there my first year, absolutely hated it, and transferred. Uh-huh. And so it's like this whole conversation we're having, like, it feels like I'm going down, memory lane again with my own experience. And I think the word that you've used over and over now is that awareness and having these conversations. I think this is where having conversations with kids early on is great. And just being able to share your experiences. Like, what did you go through and trying to help them. Whether it goes in one ear and out the other, who knows? But at least you're trying to let them know that this is what you should be thinking about. This is what mom or dad experienced, and we want to try to help you find that right fit.
Yeah. And so I think the conversations are important. And I think sometimes pausing between them is important because there is a lot of messaging. Kids are under a lot of stress as far as their next steps. And you do not need to talk about college all the time. At some point they get to be, and they should get to be, high schoolers, So there's sometimes some boundaries. This is the idea of we're only going to reserve Sundays to talk about college. I say that with real intent. I know that every time I see my niece, she's kind of fearful. I'm going to talk about college to her, right? Because she doesn't want any more messaging. So some intentionality and some, the opportunity of weaving it in and then also letting them be kids, being strategic, knowing what's coming in as far as the opportunities, and then also just letting them have the chance to work through the high school things as well, I think can be also just important messaging.
Yeah, I think that's really great insight. I was just having a conversation a week ago with another advisor. He has twins that are seniors this year, and that's what they did. Him and his wife, they basically put in guardrails where, like, we're not going to talk about college every day, but we at least have to talk about it once a week.
Yep.
And he said that was a game changer. He said, I could see the pressure come off of me and my wife. Pressure came off our kids. It wasn't like this, intense battle, if you will. So we just said once a week, we're going to check in and see where we're at with things. And I think what you just laid out and what this example was a great, recommendation. I know I only have you for a little bit more time, Heidi, but if you could leave us with, maybe one or two key strategic things that I think are important to you, both as a professional doing college planning, but also as a mom, I think that would be great. And then just so we can get you on record that you promise you're going to come back and talk about the FAFSA, because that's another topic that that'll take a whole nother hour, I think. But I know that's another topic that I get asked about all the time, especially now that all the new changes has happened with the FAFSA.
Yeah, let's do we can do an hour on the FAFSA. Plus the FAFSA form is we are days away from actually seeing it. We've only seen the beta version of it, right? So to be continued on all that financial aid stuff. I'm more than happy to do that. Can you review a little bit more about what you had to probably repeat the question that you wanted to ask.
Oh me. Yeah, and that was bad etiquette on my part, because as I learned to be a better interviewer, don't ask multiple questions at the same time.
Right.
So my last question is around what would be like one or two things that you would recommend parents do today as far as being able to make strategic choices around college planning. Is it as simple as just getting a schedule down to have conversations about college with their kids? So that's really what I wanted to leave our audience with, maybe one or two more of your golden nuggets, if you will, that they can take away.
Yeah. I do think that the idea of, please understand these, I recognize as a mom how important these are. I also want you to understand you are not imagining. It does fall on the parents to have some more layered conversations. My kids went to a fabulous high school in the suburbs of Chicago. But the reality is that when you have one high school guidance person for 270 kids, you are not necessarily having individual conversations about what fit means for your child. So wanting to help is very familiar to me. choosing to help at specific times and being smart about the opportunities can mean the difference between you enjoying it or literally just arguing about it all the time. So understand it is not too soon to start thinking about the tasks at the end of your sophomore year of high school. Some kids are absolutely ready to consider standardized testing, how that can play a role in their lives. And then junior year. So it's what can we do and when to make all of this more, the approach more intentional, more purposeful. So at the end, at your senior year, you can enjoy being a senior and going to homecoming and doing all those things that you want to do. The worst scenario is that families don't know what they don't know, and then they are waiting until their kid potentially takes the reins. They often don't take the reins until the beginning of senior year in high school. So back that up, re-engineer it, and do a little bit more purposefully within that year ahead of time, because application season, senior year, comes fast and furious. And get those Excel spreadsheets out and have those conversations for organization and potentially a checklist about what we're going to do so you can get out of it and the kid knows what's coming down and what they're in charge of, splitting up those roles. I think that can be huge help.
Well, I think that is a great segue into my closing question. As I look at the clock, I'm like, okay, I got minutes left here. This is a question I ask all my guests, and I think I can't wait for this answer from you. Is what is the best thing about being a parent?
Oh gosh. The best thing about being a parent, really, I love to be on their journey and be a part of watching them grow, mistakes and all.
Well, I knew you were going to have a great answer, and that's why I love asking that question, because of almost 120 plus episodes, everybody's question or everybody's answer is different.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate the journey that you've helped us go on today, which I think, is just the beginning. And I can't wait to have you back on to go through the FAFSA, which I know is another hot topic that a lot of listeners ask about. So Heidi King, I can't thank you enough. And College Inside Track is the name of the company that you work for on college planning. We'll be sure to put in our show notes a link to that, and as well as a couple other resources that we talked about today. But Heidi, thank you so much for all your insights, and can't wait to have this next conversation with you soon.
Yep. Thank you so much for featuring and helping your families through this. And I really appreciate getting to know you, working with you, and having an opportunity to be on your podcast. What you're doing is awesome for your family. So thanks so much for including me.
Thanks, Heidi.
All right.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, could you do me a favor? Do you know anyone else who would enjoy these types of conversations where we talk about the intersections of our emotional and financial lives? Because if you do, it's actually going to help both of us. Could you share this conversation with someone? They will think you're great because you just gave them this terrific podcast, and it helps me grow my audience. Or you can tell them to go to tamacapital.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast. Please visit tamacapital.com to subscribe to this podcast or to connect with certified financial planner and registered investment advisor Paul Fenner of Tama Capital. And please join us again next time on the Emotional Balance Sheet Podcast.